I have the distinct privilege of introducing our keynote for lunch, Dr. Carey Wright. Dr. Wright became the state superintendent in Mississippi in 2013. Under her leadership, Mississippi has initiated aggressive education reforms that have increased literacy skills, K through third grade, pushed student achievement on the National Assessment of Educational Progress, and has improved at rates faster than any other state. She's increased the graduation rate to an all-time high of 83%. Dr. Wright spearhead, that's right, give her a hand, that's big, thank you. She's spearheaded initiatives in Mississippi that nearly doubled advanced placement participation and success rate, resulted in significant gains in ELA and math, early education, and is one of only 5 states in the nation that has met the majority quality standards for early childhood education. She's past president of the board of directors of the Council of Chief State School Officers and is a member of Chiefs for Change. Now that I got the formal introduction, let me tell you about Carey. Carey and I work together in DC, and I deeply respect her work. She's a practitioner, and if you know me, that matters. She's a special educator, an outstanding teacher. She was an amazing school leader. She was an amazing leader in DC public schools. She's humble, she's smart, she gets it. She advocates for kids all of the time, every day. She's relentless, and in the relentlessness, she's nice. She has 2 daughters who idolize her. They're both grown, but that tells you what kind of mother she's been. And simultaneously, I watched her take care of her parents, and there was never a moment that she didn't speak of them lovingly. She always packed her lunch. Good person, smart person, and someone I really respect in the field. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my friend and colleague, and most of all, just a really good human being, Carey Wright.
Well, good afternoon. Glad to be here. Glad to be here talking about equity, particularly from the Council of Chief State School Officers, and we're going to talk about that just a little bit, and what we're doing in our state. But what we have done to advance equity in our state and for our children and for our nation. So let me start with, so these are the 10 equity commitments that each of the chief states, state chiefs, yours may be called a commissioner, some are called a superintendent, whatever that title is called. We have them in every single state, and we gather together to write this document and talk about our commitment to equity as we lead states. This has been a delight for me, I was president this past year, to be out talking about what my platform had to do with, and that had to do with early childhood. But what I want you to notice here, of the 10, Mississippi prioritized the ones that are in blue for immediate attention. But before I talk about our work, I want to share a few other things about why equity is so important. You know, we sat and we listened to several things today that really touched my heart. But one of the things that I want you to really think about is that education is life-determining. Now think about that for a second. Education is life-determining. And here we are as educators with little ones in front of us every single day who depend on us to do what is right. We are setting the course for these children. And quite honestly, we say this lightly, but we mean this sincerely for the future of our states and for the future of our nation. You know, as a parent, I can remember sending my 2 girls to school and being totally trusting in who was receiving them to do the best that they could by them. And I want you to think about that. I once heard a researcher say, parents are sending the very best they've got. They're not keeping the good kids at home. And I remember that as a teacher and as a principal, that they are coming to us depending on us to do what is right. When Mississippi developed its strategic plan, we did not have a strategic plan. We certainly do now, and we're adhering to that. You see there's 6 goals. And it was very important as we crafted these goals that we were intentional about their wording. And the one thing that you're going to see is equity is embedded in each one of these goals. So when you see the term all children will be proficient in gaining growth in tested areas, but growth period. Every student graduating from high school, college, and career ready. Every child having access to early childhood programming. Every school having effective teachers and leaders. Every school district person using data to drive outcomes for children. And then the board came back and said, and they want all of our schools and districts to be rated C or higher on an A through F system. So I'm going to talk about some of the equity commitments that we took on, but we did it deliberately, and we started with organizing our central office, or our department, our central office, the state agency around these commitments. But equity is about doing what is in the best interest of all children. And when I say all, I mean all. And that's one thing that I even had my chief of staff come to me after I had one of my very first presentations, and I was talking about that. And he said, do you know you're the first state superintendent we've ever had that said those words? All means all. And he goes, and more importantly, you mean what you say. And I said, you're exactly right. Because I said, and I say again and again, we look at data all the time, but behind every data point is a face. It's not just enough to look at the data. That face behind that data point has a name, has strengths, has needs, and if you as leaders, whether you're leading in a classroom or leading in a school or leading at a central office, if you don't know the name and the face, you're not going to be able to meet that student's needs, because there is not a one-size-fits-all for every single subgroup of children. And I think you can't do this work by osmosis. Equity has to be done deliberately and addressed strategically. It is not going to happen if you don't make it happen. And we have decided way early on, first time our districts in our state had ever received disaggregated data. Now, forget the fact that No Child Left Behind started with that in 2001. Let me repeat this again. 2 years ago, we put out the first report by school, by district, of disaggregated data. And it opened a lot of people's eyes. Because lo and behold, what do you think we saw? We saw a whole lot of gaps. And that was really the conversation that we started 2 years ago about gaps in achievement. We also provide chronic absenteeism. We also talk about early warning systems. We talk about, are you looking at the ABCs, attendance, behavior, course completion? Are you doing it in a thoughtful and ongoing way? We did not want any child to be flying under the radar. And that's what aggregating data does. It allows you to miss people. It allows children to become invisible if you are not really looking at disaggregated data. And we also know that children that aren't in school aren't learning. I know that sounds simple, but if they're not in school, they're not learning. So we've got to pay attention to absenteeism. You know, one of the things that we've also done under ESSA, all schools are to be developing school improvement plans, and we need to know that what they're doing in terms of looking at their overall achievement. But they also now are having to look at subgroups of children that are lagging behind. And that made some people very uncomfortable. We really need to put a spotlight on this? Yes, you do. Because if you don't know who's lagging behind, and your community doesn't know who's lagging behind, you'll never know how to fix that issue. So we had to create a sense of urgency around this work. And we brought people in, school teams in, school team that included the superintendent, principals, parents, teachers, central office people, and they had to talk to us, my leadership team, as well as others inside the department, about what they were going to do to improve. And it caused a lot of conversation. Did it take a lot of time to do this? You better believe it. We conducted over 100 interviews at the state level, asking teams to come in. But it was invaluable information for us. Because I am a firm believer, go back to my all means all. If students with disabilities are not succeeding, then all students are not succeeding. If children who are coming from low-income families are not succeeding, then all children are not succeeding. If African American children are not succeeding, then all children are not succeeding. And we really have to stay on that course and beat that drum. Because there are some people that think there's not a problem with that. But there is a problem with that. It's not just some children that we want to succeed, or children with that zip code that we want to succeed. We want all children to succeed. You know, our students depend on us to do this work. Our parents depend on us to do this work. Our communities depend on us to do this work. The future of our nation depends on us to do this work. But you know what's most important? It's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do for children and for families. You know, we set goals in the state, long-range goals, out to about 2025, and we had to look at our own data as a state. Now, these are state-level goals. Schools had to set their own goals. Districts had to set their own goals. But I want you to look at, some of them are kind of stretch goals. But we knew if we did not double down and say this is what we were going to do and measure it and monitor it, then it wasn't going to get done. So you see, we're talking about 70% of English learners making progress toward English language proficiency. Right now, we're at 48%. So we've got, what is this, 7 more years, 6 more years? And we're monitoring this on an ongoing basis. If you take a look at the percent of students at proficiency, we want 70% to be proficient. Right now, we're hovering around 35 to 38%, depending on what data you're looking at. Graduation rate, we want 90%. Right now, actually, Michael missed our latest announcement. I'm going to talk about that in a second. We're now at 84%. So that has continued to come up, and I'm going to show you a slide about that in a second. Gaps, I mentioned it. We're looking at gaps between students with disabilities and all students, reduced to 20%. Look where it is right now, 47%. That is unacceptable. That is unacceptable. And achievement gaps between African Americans and all students entirely, we are going to eliminate, and that gap is currently at 29%. So that's where we've decided to put a stake in the ground. So let me show you how we're showing schools what this looks like. This is a slide. We have developed very parent-friendly report cards. Go on our website. Mississippi Succeeds is the title of our website where you'll find these data. But I wanted families to know what was going on and communities to know what was going on. So I want you to see there's a bar, a gray bar to the right. That is our state goal of 70%. And for this particular school, represented by the blue bar that you see, 50% of African American students are proficient in math compared to 83.2% of white children. Now I'm here to tell you, this is a school with an A rating. And we deliberately chose this slide. So they can't hide that, right? And now I say to them what I said to you, behind every data point is a face. You need to know who those children are. This is the value of disaggregating data. Let me give you a little bit of a context about Mississippi when I got there in 2013. We have the highest national rate of children living in poverty at that time at 34%. That's huge. We had children that were on free and reduced lunch, almost 71% statewide. Quality Counts 2013, those of you I'm sure are very aware of that. Education Week puts that out. We were 50th in K-12 education, earned us an F. We had to look very seriously inwardly at what we were doing. There's a lot of parts of our state that are rural, but you've got generational poverty that's out in the state and racial inequities throughout the state. And in Mississippi, we don't talk about race much. which is kind of interesting as a southern state with all the history that Mississippi has. But we are talking about that in education today, yesterday, and we will be tomorrow, because we have to change things in Mississippi. But despite all these challenges, and they were challenges, they continue to be challenges, we made a decision and a commitment to forge ahead. And we were going to forge ahead boldly, because we knew if we did not act with a sense of urgency in a targeted, strategic way, these data were never going to change. But before I talk to you about the initiatives, I want to now show you, here's quality counts for 2018. So we have come from an F to a C minus. We're now tied with the national average, ranked 15th. Equity, we now, based on achievement gaps, we have moved to a B, ranked 34th. K-12, we're up from an F to a D. The national average is a C, and you can see where we are with the overall grade and overall poverty. Are we where we want to be? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I've told people I did not leave my 2 children in Maryland to come to Mississippi for us to remain on the bottom. That is not acceptable. And so I've gathered an amazing team. We have an amazing group of people in our department, some of the best and brightest people you'd ever want to meet, but that was strategic on our part. We totally reorganized the whole state agency and brought in the best and the brightest, because this is not easy work. So what does ESSA mean for Mississippi? Well, we developed the most rigorous standards we have ever had. We developed those and approved those, and that's what teachers are now implementing. The standards that we had before had been evaluated by 2 national organizations, and one of the phrases were worst in the nation, and the other phrase was atrocious. So we knew when we had to develop standards, we knew that they needed to be, A, better, obviously, than what we had, but they had to be more rigorous, because expectations in the state were low for what children were doing where education was concerned. We then developed our own assessment. And I said, when you put out that RFP, here are the 2 main things I want to have happen. I want it to be, 1, it's got to be aligned to our standards. Teachers deserve no less. And 2, I want it to mirror the rigor of NAEP. Because when NAEP was coming out, we were saying under our old standards and under our old assessment, oh, we've got 65 to 70% of our children that are proficient in reading. NAEP would come out and go, actually, it's 22. So that was an honesty gap for us. So I said, no, I want our test to mirror the rigor of NAEP. We also wanted to make sure that when that occurred, we had an accountability system that was going to really hold schools and districts and the state accountable for making sure that children were growing. We wanted to expand early childhood education. When I got to Mississippi, we did not have, I'm going to say practically 0 to maybe 1% of early childhood in Mississippi. And when I'm thinking to myself, coming from the Northeast, coming from DC, that's got universal pre-K, that was a shock to me. One of the first questions I asked when I got there, who's in charge of early childhood? Well, Dr. Wright, we don't have an early childhood office in the State Department. So when we wrote our strategic plan, God love my board, they added a goal for the first time in Mississippi's history that every student will have access to high-quality pre-K, because that's a lever that we were not pulling. So let me talk to you a little bit about the equity commitments and how you can work on this, how we worked on this. So equity commitment number 3 was measure what matters and create an accountability for equity. So our accountability model now has in it, we measure the proficiency and growth of the lowest 25% of our children. And who comprises the lowest 25% of our children? Children of color. So that's built into our accountability model. We measure proficiency rates. But growth is powerful. Are you growing children from year to year? So our accountability model takes a look at that. As you all are doing, we're adding a component for English language learners. But we report on the gaps. And we made graduation a powerful part. When I got to Mississippi in 2013, our graduation rate was hovering around 73%, and our dropout rate was at 16.3%. Our graduation rate is now at 84%, and our dropout rate is at 10.1%. So people are paying attention, making sure that we are engaging children, keeping them in school, and making sure that they walk across the stage. Commitment number 7 was engage more deeply. Monitor equitable implementation of standards and assessments. I've talked to you about our assessments. We have trained our teachers, continue to provide professional development around our assessments, as well as a variety of things, because literacy was huge in our state. When I got there in 13, even on NAEP, we were 1 to 2 years below grade level on almost every single measure. So you can't fight the data. The data are telling you something. They're telling you you've got to get up and do something about it. So we've also partnered with the university because chronic absenteeism was at 15%. And so but every time I kept coming out with all this information, people were saying, well, that's just not Mississippi kids. Yeah, it is Mississippi kids, right? So I went to Mississippi State, partnered with them, and said, I need you to produce a report for me that talks about chronic absenteeism. And the data show that if children are absent even 2 days in September, think about this, beginning of the year, they are more likely to become chronically absent than if they had not missed 2 days in September. We have done a lot around advanced placement. When I first got to Mississippi, I was having people tell me, well, we don't offer advanced placement. What do you mean you don't offer advanced placement? Sounds like DC, doesn't it, Michael, when we first got there? But we put AP initiatives in place. We opened up access and opportunity, and now we have more than double the number of children that are taking advanced placement classes and receiving passing grades. And the 2 subgroups that have shown the most improvement are Hispanic and African American children in terms of participation, as well as receiving a passing score. We started providing regional professional development around our state. I knew our capacity wasn't that big, and those of you that may not know how state agencies work, the legislature only gives you X number of positions that you can hire. You can't, as a district, when I was in a district, if I needed another teacher, if I needed this or that, I could go out and hire that, as many of them as I had money to do. But not at a state agency. You're only allowed to hire the number of people that you have been given by your legislature. But I had money. So I went to University of Mississippi, and I said, I want you to hire 17 professional development people that we actually hire, but I need them to be your employees. Will you do that for me? And Ole Miss said, yeah, we'll do that for you. So they hired the 17 people in professional development, English language arts, math, early childhood, and special education, and we deployed them around the state of Mississippi. So I wanted a principal or a superintendent to be able to say, looking at their data, my teachers need help with X, and my professional development coordinator goes to the school, plans the professional development, executes on the professional development, and then is back in that school coaching teachers around what they needed. And that's something that I'll tell you, you'll never see them in our agency because they're constantly out and about the state helping teachers. But we've got to do the best that we can as a state agency to be in support of our teachers and our districts. Commitment number 4 was go local, engage the LEAs and provide tailored and differentiated support. I've talked to you a little bit about what we've done with professional development. I mentioned these interviews that we have, and let me tell you how important that is as a state to know what's going out there. I believe that everybody wants to do the best thing. I don't believe that people come in any given day and say, what can we do to screw up the day for children, right? But some people come in with the capacity to know what to do, and others don't. And it's on us then to help build that capacity. I had a team that shall remain nameless sitting in front of the leadership team. Chronic absenteeism rate in that district was around 38%. Think about that. So I asked the question of the superintendent, do you have an attendance committee that's looking at this data? And the response I got was, oh, I have someone entering that data at central office. Now, I didn't follow up. There was no need for follow-up. I knew that that person did not know how to do that. So now I can meet with my team on the side and say, your follow-up is to go out and meet with this district and help them to be better at that. I think that we have got to do more around coaching. We have dispersed literacy coaches throughout our state. We now have about 80 of them, and they're in the lowest performing districts that we've got, the lowest performing schools, and we are monitoring their data. You know, I mentioned commitment number 6, start early, invest in the youngest learners. We've done amazing work in Mississippi around early childhood. Not near the amount we need to do, but we got a law passed around the Early Learning Collaborative Act that started the first publicly funded pre-K in Mississippi. And now, 5 years later, we have been recognized by the National Institute of Early Education Research for meeting their quality indicators. Only one of 5 states, 7 states actually in the nation to do that. And so we know what quality looks like. So when we did that, and we had a kindergarten assessment that we gave at the fall, I said, let's change the enrollment form and ask parents to let us know where their children were as 4-year-olds. Because I wanted to get the lay of the land. I knew what was happening coming into kindergarten, but what was happening with them as 4-year-olds? So we did that, so I could disaggregate the data. And it was a little shocking, and it upset a few people, because then I published the data. That's one thing you'll know, my team will tell you about me, I'm very transparent, because the data are what the data are. So the 2 lowest groups of children coming into kindergarten, 2 lowest groups, one is not a surprise to you, children are kept at home. 1 point differential, students in Head Start. Now, that was shocking. And Head Start was not happy with me about that. But my point was, then we're here as partners to improve programming for children. So let's work together on this. It's not to point the finger, and it's not to be shameful. But if you don't know what's happening, you don't know what to do about it. And so now we went to Kellogg, amazing partner for us, and we said to Kellogg, we need to hire coaches. I didn't have the positions for it, didn't have the money for it. We need to hire family engagement people. We need to hire professional development people. And so Kellogg said, put together a grant, and we did, and they awarded us a $6 million grant. And now I have early childhood coaches. Well, guess where they are? Based on my data, I can now send them to all those programs that are across the state that are not doing well to make them better at what they do. I think the other thing that we've done, which I feel my passion has always been with special education, we have now given districts, they can apply for grants with us to open up blended pre-K programs. So those are programs with students with disabilities as well as children that do not have disabilities. We've done an awful lot to focus on teachers and leaders. You've got a team here that's embedded in that work. We just received a $4 million grant from Kellogg to launch teacher residency and performance-based licensure programs throughout our state. We have done a lot to try and focus on diversifying the pipeline. Children have to see people of color in the front of classrooms and leading schools. So we had a convening of about 75 minority male educators. We brought them together for a day. And we said, tell us, what strategies do we need to employ to keep males of color in our classrooms and in our schools? What can we do to recruit them? What does it take? And it was a day well spent. We started Grow Your Own programs. As I mentioned, we've got areas of our state you wouldn't get somebody to move to. But people that live there love it there. So let's help those districts grow their own so that they can keep up with the teacher supply. Because you know and I know that teacher shortage is alive and well in the nation, and it's certainly alive and well in our state. We've also partnered with CCSSO. And if your state is not actively engaged with the Council of Chief State School Officers, talk to your state chief about that. You talk about resources. You can get involved in initiatives around the nation with other states to help you do this work. It doesn't have to be just you. And that's the beauty of involving yourself in a national way, because then you can learn from others around the nation. We found, I don't know about you, we were finding superintendents and principals telling us our teachers don't know how to teach reading on day one. Now I'm talking about teaching the foundational skills of reading. So we said, okay, then we had money through part of the legislation that we were given, and we put out an RFP, and the key was you had to, whatever vendor we picked, had to know how to teach teachers the foundational skills of reading and how to teach the foundational skills of reading. I cannot even begin to tell you how that has paid off for us. But it was expensive. So I went to my other very good partner, the Regional Educational Lab Southeast. All of you belong to a REL. We belong to the Southeast REL. And I said, could you come in and validate that what they're doing in the professional development, because it was 20-some-odd hours of online, 3 days of face-to-face, and then teachers were required to take an assessment. So REL came in, REL Southeast, videotaped hundreds of teachers around the state. They took the training. They went back and analyzed it, and they said, you are exactly seeing in the classroom what you need to be seeing. And that's showing up in our proficiency rates. So we've stuck with it because it has done such a good job. You know, we have really been very proud of the work that we've done. And it's hard work. I can't say enough about the team. I've told people I get the joy of coming out and bragging on them because they're the ones that are doing the boots on the ground work. But we have really partnered across the state with our districts and our schools to make this happen. In fact, the 2018 Quality Counts report recognized Mississippi as one of the 5 most improved states on the national assessment. So there it shows you our gains from 13 to 17 in the grades in both on NAEP in 4th grade reading and 4th grade math. This shows you overall over a 10-year period. Right now, Mississippi is tied with Washington State as being the #1 state in the nation on gains in 8th grade reading from 15 to 17. This shows you we are #2 over a 10-year period. We have been #2 in the nation for our gains in 4th grade reading, #4 in the nation for our gains in 4th grade math, 7 for our gains in 8th grade math, and 12 for our gains in 8th grade reading. In fact, our rankings show that we are making gains faster than most other states in the nation. This is what's happening with proficiency. Yeah, thank you. We're proud of that. We're real proud of that. I am a very proud state chief, if you have not figured that out yet. But we took our assessments, as I said, they were very seriously. You can see our growth over time. We have gone from about a third of our students, and we're hovering in and getting close to about 50%, which is good. But all subgroups have shown improvement over time. This stat I really am very proud of, and share this with my superintendents on a regular basis. We wanted to know the number of districts, we've got 146 of them, the number of districts that had 45% or more of their children proficient or advanced. And you can see the gains there. We have nearly tripled the number of districts in our state that have 45% or more of their children proficient or advanced. I went to my CIO and I said, I want you to develop some heat maps for me. So he did. So if you take a look, this is 15, 17, and 16, 17, and 18. The color coding, if you look at it, you'll see the reds and oranges. Those are the D and F districts. And the yellows and greens and blues are the A, Bs, and Cs. So you can see visually what I call the greening of Mississippi. Said lovingly, because that's what you want to see. You want to see that we're making progress. And right now, we have almost 70% of our schools and districts that have achieved a C rating or higher. I talked about advanced placement. We've got lots of kids out there that need access to advanced placement, dual credit, dual enrollment. We've had this going with a huge initiative, and you can see the amount of progress that we are making around advanced placement. We've worked now with all of our institutions of higher learning, because some were saying when children passed a test, well, we'll only accept a 3 or higher. Others said, well, no, we'll only accept a 4 or higher. Some even said, no, we're only going to accept a 5. Really? So we doubled down with IHL and said, we need to do something that's consistent, and across this nation, 3 or higher gets accepted. So starting in the fall of this year, any child that takes an advanced placement class and scores a 3 or higher will automatically earn 3 credits of college, and depending on the course, can earn up to 6 credits of college. So absolutely. And the 2 groups that you see, African American and Hispanic, those increases, those are the 2 subgroups that we've seen that have increased the most. I talked about our graduation rate. We're very proud of that. You know, we take great pride in making sure that all of our children are graduating. Our students with disabilities struggle the most. That's no surprise. But we are now changing our strategy around special education for the upcoming years. And our dropout rate, as I mentioned, has gone down. But there was, you know, I think people need to see what's possible. You know, I came from 2 outstanding districts before I even got to D.C. I was in Montgomery County schools in Maryland. I was in Howard County schools in Maryland. I knew what excellence looked like. I knew what was possible. And when we worked in D.C., we knew we could get children in these classes and excelling. We knew what was possible. And part of what I think you need to do as you're working in your states or you're working in your schools, you've got to have that belief system. You've got to have people in your schools that believe that. I've got to have people in my department that believe that. Because if you don't believe that, you don't belong working in the State Department. Absolutely not. And if you don't believe that and you're sitting there as a principal, I was a principal for a long time. And you better believe that I worked at making sure that the people in my building had that same commitment, that same sense of urgency around students with disabilities, African American children, Hispanic children. It doesn't make any difference. Too many children are not being afforded opportunities. And it's the adults in the room. And let me tell you something I'm very clear on. My work, the work of my department, the work that we do across the state is for children. Now, are we building the capacity of our teachers and leaders? You better believe it, because I honestly believe that's what it's going to take to make a difference across the state. Teachers want to do the very best they can. Principals want to do the very best they can. And those that already have the skills and are working on that, great. But I also want those teachers that say, look, just tell me what it is you want me to do and show me how to do it. And everybody can get there. Education, I believe, has the power to level the playing field for anyone in this nation. And I tell you, that is what I wake up to and think about every single day. If this work were easy, everybody would be doing it. If it were easy to get everybody at proficiency and advanced, we would have already done that. But we as educators have to believe in our heart of hearts, not judgment, in our heart of hearts that no matter who walks through that door, we can meet their needs. I was very blessed that I had teachers that took my 2 daughters, very different children. My oldest was the one that was always sitting on her feet, getting up out of a chair, had to walk around, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. My youngest was the one, like her mother, that sometimes just didn't know when to stop talking. But instead of saying, you know, shut up, sit down, whatever, they really worked with those 2 girls to show them that there's, okay, Megan, my oldest, maybe you need to be the person that takes the attendance to the office. Maybe you need to be the person that passes out the paper. Maybe you need, so constantly giving her a chance to move around. Both bright children, both very, very successful. But I trusted the teachers to do that. Parents trust us to do that. And so I want to close by reading one of my very, very favorite quotes from Theodore Roosevelt. And this is This has driven me. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbled, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. So I ask you, never fail to dare greatly. Thank you.